In this video, I'm going to show you a really simple and fast way to improvise ambient cinematic soundscapes on a synthesizer, even if you don't know how to play. In order to do that, you're going to want a keyboard synthesizer that can do a synthesizer pad, which is a sound that starts very softly, gets louder as you hold the note. The note sustains as long as you hold the key down, and then when you release the key, it fades out slowly. So something like this. Most electronic keyboards have a bank of synth pads. If yours doesn't, maybe you can find an organ sound or another synthesizer sound or a string sound. If all you have is an old acoustic piano, that'll work too. You can just hold the sustain pedal down or maybe put a brick on it to save your foot. And do what I'm going to show you in this video. So the thing that makes this all work is we can play a 3-note chord shape here. Now in the video, I'm going to be playing the chord shape using my 3 fingers like this. When you play the chord like a real keyboardist, you're going to place your thumb on the first note, your middle finger on the second note, and your pinky finger on the third note. But if I play like this, it's hard to see what's going on. So I'm going to be playing like this so you can see the notes that I'm playing. I'm going to pick any note. I'm going to start on A, why not? And I'm going to play this chord shape. And I'm just going to pick a note. I'm going to go 1, 2 up from it, and I'll play that note. And I'm going to go 2 up from it and play that note. That's my basic 3-note chord shape. The thing that's neat about this is that you can move it around. I can take that same shape, move it over 1 to the right. I get a different chord. Move it over again. Move it over again. And again. And again. I can play it down here. I can play it here. So that's the big trick. But on its own, the big trick doesn't really get you a lot of interesting chords or harmonic complexity or harmonic richness. In order to do that, we're going to add a bass note. And here's the next part that's really easy. If I play that 3-note chord shape, I can play any bass note along with it. What do I mean by bass note? Any note that's below the chord, any note that's over here. So if I play my 3-note chord shape there, and I play this bass note, this happens to be an A minor over here with an F in the bass. It doesn't matter if you know the names of the white keys. Oh, and by the way, we're only playing white keys in this. We never touch the black keys. It's a minefield of sour chords. You really have to know how a keyboard works harmonically before you start dabbling in black keys. But we're going to take advantage of the fact that the white keys are laid out so that you can play in the key of C major or its relative minor key, A minor, without ever using any black keys. Anyhow, here's my 3-note chord up here, my 3-note chord shape, and here's my bass note. I'm going to play these together. Oh, I like that. I can move this chord down, and I can do it while holding the same bass note, so. And here's the fun part. You can play any white key bass note with your any of this 3-note chord shape anywhere you want on the keyboard, and it's always going to sound okay. I'm not kidding. Now, it might not sound to you exactly like the music that you hear in your heart or your head, but as you noodle around with this movable chord shape and play bass notes, you're going to notice some that you really respond strongly to. You think, ooh, that sounds good. And you'll remember those. And as you continue to play, you will start to refine your approach. You'll get more deliberate about playing. And pretty soon you'll have things that you really like to play, and you'll have things that you come back to time and time again. Let's look at some other things that we can do with this. A really simple thing that you can do is, instead of playing all three of your notes at once, you can play them one at a time. So or with the bass note. Different chord. And it doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3. It can be 2, 3, 1. Or 3, 1, 2. That's called an arpeggio. It just means you take the notes in your chord and you break them up into a series of single notes, creating a melody. You can also make melodies. If you've got your bass note going here, you can make melodies just by playing any keys you want, as long as it's the white keys. So here we are. There's that chord that I love so much. Or if I play it so you can see what I'm doing. So those are just notes that I picked out of a hat. They all are going to sound okay. Some of them are going to sound really good. To give you an idea of what I mean by something that sounds other than really good, let's look at a black key here. So again, we'll go back to this chord that I like so much. That sounds great. If I go here, if I play this black key, not good. Sometimes it'll work. I could do this. That sounds good. It sounds like it's headed somewhere. But we're going to just make this simple by saying we're going to leave out the black keys, or the minefield, or the spice rack, whatever you want to think of them as. But just don't touch them, and you'll be in good shape. Now, you might play that for a while and think, well, this is getting kind of samey. What are some ways to change things up? Well, let's try this. We'll try our 3-note chord shape. Playing this one on C this time. I can take these top 2 notes and move them up one. Or I could play them, here's my chord again. Or you can move them down one, all the while keeping your first note, your root note as it's called most of the time, in place. So I could do something like this, maybe. You could also use those resulting chord shapes. So instead of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, the skip a note, we could use this chord shape as our chord shape, as our movable chord shape. That'll work too. And we can also use a simplified shape, where instead of using 3 notes for the chord, we could just use 2. So instead of this shape, we're going to try a different shape here. And again, I'm going to use a hand posture that is not how you really are going to play this, just so you can see the notes that I'm playing. This one is sort of we call it a 1-4 maybe. It's so the 1 is the first note, 2, 3, 4 is the second note. That's also a movable shape. It has a bit more of an exotic sound than that 3-note chord shape that we played, but that's cool. We can use that in places. Let's try this. We're going to do a 1-4 in our right hand here, and we're going to do a 1-5 on our left hand. So we're skipping, there's 1, skip, skip, note, 1, skip, skip, skip. Play the note. That sounds really cool. And I can move it around. Now I want to talk about what I just did there at the end. When you play a series of chords, it's called a chord progression. Chord progressions tend to build tension or anxiousness or excitement in the mood of the music. And sometimes you'll get to a point where there's just too much tension and you want to resolve that tension, or resolve is the word that we use in a chord progression. When a harmony resolves, the tension goes away, it relaxes. And because everything on this keyboard is diatonic to the key of C major, you can always play a G major and go, oh, because the tension is resolved. So if you're playing and you get to a point where you think, wow, I don't know where this can go, it sounds really weird, play a G major and start over again. The other thing we can do that is quick and easy as far as adding some interest to this is to use something called a polychord. A polychord is 2 chords stacked on top of each other. In order to do this, your keyboard needs to be able to play at least 6 notes at a time. Most modern polyphonic synthesizers will do that. We're going to play one here, and it's going to be these 3 notes here. It's the A minor, the old A minor chord that I keep using. And down here, it's going to be the F major chord that I keep using, and we'll play those together. That sounds pretty cool. It kind of reminds me of, if you're familiar with old Genesis, it sounds like the beginning to Watcher of the Skies. I don't know that it's actually the chord that's used there, but it is reminiscent of that. Here's another really good polychord that I'm very fond of if we do this one here, starting on a D up here. And I'm using some white key note names here. It's handy to know those. You don't have to know those, obviously, because anywhere you put these shapes is going to work. But for your own reference, to be able to make notes about things that you thought sounded really good, it's handy to learn the 7 note names. There's not that many, right? So it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B. That's it. That's all you have to know. You go, wait a minute, there's all this keyboard here. What are all the rest of them? And the answer is, it just repeats. So if I start on this C, because the C is wherever you see a pair of black keys, C is always just to the left of the lower black key, the one that's to the left. Now, here's another polychord that I really like the sound of. This one is a D minor in the right hand and a C major in the left hand, and we're going to play them together. That sounds pretty cool. Can you move them around? Sure, but Sometimes they'll sound great, sometimes they'll sound a bit murky. But use them sparingly, and they can add some interest to your music. You could also play that one that I just played there with the C in the left hand, the D minor in the right hand, and then you remember our trick where we move the top two notes up in our chord. Now you can see those get a bit dense in terms of a lot of notes playing at the same time, and the harmonies can get kind of murky, so you'd probably want to use those sparingly. There's one other trick I'm going to talk about here with those chords, and again, you don't have to know the note names, it can be handy. But if I play that A minor chord here, it starts on A, right? Well, one thing I can do is, because there's another A right up here, the A is right here. The A is, if you look at the cluster of 3 black notes on your keyboard, the A is just to the left of the top, or the highest, or the rightmost black key in the cluster of 3. Instead of playing this A, I can play this A up here, so I'm going to move my fingers. So now this is used to be the second note in my chord, and the third note in my chord, and then here's the A now, but it's on top. It's the same chord, it's still an A minor, and in fact I can do that same trick again. I can take this C and move it up to here, so now I've got these 3 notes. It's still an A minor. It's still the same chord harmonically as this. It's just we kick the root note up to the next higher octave. Those are called chord inversions. Inversions are kind of neat, and there's a neat trick you can do with an inversion here. I'm going to take that. Here's my A minor, right? Remember? So the first inversion is this. And then I'm going to split the notes between both hands here. So I might be playing this note and this note in the upper register, and then this C I'm going to play down here. So that's still an A minor harmonically, but it sounds different than the A minor that's there. So those are all things you can do to spice up your all-white key improvisations while you're going through the music that you're playing. The big things to remember: the 3-note chord shape, only the white keys, and also play slowly and steadily. I would recommend when you play these chords, play them for a slow, steady count of 4. And when you come to a resolution, either by going to a G major, or if you find a chord that sounds like a resolution, where the tension is relieved, hold that for twice as long. So you do that for a count of 8. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, and so on. I'm going to show you one other little trick you can do. We've talked about some different chord shapes, but the other thing you can do, I call the smoosh, and jazz organists are fond of the smoosh. The smoosh is where you just smoosh down a bunch of keys at once, all next to each other. You would think that'd sound terrible, but it sounds kind of cool. So here's a smoosh. You can throw those in, but mostly I'm doing that to show you that it's really hard to play a bum note when you're doing this. You'd have to stray onto the black keys to really have something that sounds really sour. So, there you go. Go ahead and improvise your heart out with this. Play as long as you like. Some things you can do while you're doing this that can enhance it, that are related. You could play along with some beats. So if you have a drum machine, or if you have, there's a rhythm loop on YouTube or that you download from the internet, you can play along with that. You can use a looper, and looping is really beyond the scope of this little video here, but looping is essentially using a specialized kind of audio recorder to record a chord progression like our we take that and we loop it, so it would just play those 3 chords over and over, or however many chords you played over and over. And then you could take your synthesizer and you could improvise a melody over that. You could also, select a different sound on your keyboard, so you might record your background loop with a synth pad and then play your melody with a piano or whatever suits you. The other thing you could do is play along with a friend who can play an instrument or sing, as long as they can improvise in the key of C major or A minor or any of the modes of C major. We'll talk about modes in another video. Another thing you can do to enhance this is to add a visual component. You can, if your music room has special lighting that you like, maybe a colored light bulb or a candle or a lava lamp, a star projector, hell, even a planetarium if you got one, that can be cool. You can also turn on a movie or a video, turn the sound all the way down, and make your own soundtrack. Nature or space videos are well suited to that especially, but you could also use, The Wizard of Oz or something. Or it could be a still image, maybe a painting or a photograph or a mandala, and use that as your visual focus while you improvise. Or you can just think of an image, a blue sea or a forest in summertime, or a big city at night, or a snowy afternoon, or the sky on a cloudy day, whatever inspires you, and try to evoke that with your music. Though it works in both directions, sometimes music will evoke images in your mind. There's one other thing that I want to mention here, which is accessibility. If you have physical characteristics that make it hard to use both hands or all of your fingers, or maybe you don't have hands or fingers at all, there are other ways to play music. Again, it's kind of beyond the scope of this, but I would suggest checking out something called MIDI bass pedals. It's a keyboard, it's an 1 octave typically keyboard that you can play with your feet or with whatever limb you could press a foot pedal down with. It would allow you to play the bass parts, the left-hand parts here, if you have a limitation that stops you from doing that with your hands. The other thing you can do that is pretty easy to do is, with our 3-note chord shape here, you could fashion a device that just has, it's a crossbar and then some little nubs, like fingers, that would allow you to simply press all 3 notes down at once just by holding on to this little device here. I'll probably make one here and show it to you in another video. A bit like a big rubber stamp maybe, except instead of having a design on the bottom, it just has 3 nubs that'll press down at the right spacing for your keys on your keyboard. And you could use that to play the 3-note chord shape, even if you don't have, finger dexterity in your hands. Maybe you can just grip it. Maybe you can just attach it to your arm. Maybe you can attach it to your foot or another part of your body. All of these things would allow you to use this method and adapt it to your particular characteristics. All right, that's all I got for now. Happy improvising, and we'll see you in the next video.